Hi, for this video, I'm going to talk about how I chose hardware to build my first PC. This should be useful to anyone who is interested in building PC for the first time. Let's get started. First, you will need to know what inside a PC. From the picture, you will see that the PC must have the following hardwares. First, CPU or Central Processing Unit. Second, GPU or Graphic Processing Unit. Third, RAM or memory. Fourth, storage device. Fifth, mainboard or motherboard. Sixth, PSU or power supply. 7. Cooling system. And finally, case. Any PC must have all of these components. Besides CPU and GPU, another word that you should know is APU. An APU is a CPU with a built-in GPU inside. Therefore, if we choose to use an APU, there is no need for a PC to have a discrete GPU. So, for PC building, there are two options as follows. First, PC using CPU and discrete GPU or video card. Second option, PC using only one APU. The advantage of the first option is that we can choose CPU and GPU separately from a variety of hardware, which meet our requirements. While choosing an APU may not have many options, at least it helps save the budget. Easy to start and can be upgraded later if needed. Another thing I want you to know is the priority of choosing hardware. CPU and APU have the highest priority in this list. This means you need to select the CPU or APU first. Once you have done that, you will be able to choose compatible GPU, RAM, storage device, and motherboard. The cooling system, power supply unit, and case are our last consideration. Let's start with an example of choosing hardware. The example is actually the first PC I built, and it's a PC that only uses an APU. First, choose an APU. You will need to choose the one that best suits your need and budget. APU information can be found on the internet and reviews. For me, I chose AMD Ryzen 5 3400G to build my PC. It is a cost-effective APU and has a satisfactory level of graphic processing. When the APU has been selected, here's what you need to know. The APU information that we have to take a look at is the socket type, PCIe version, and support memory. In the case of Ryzen 3400G, the socket type is AM4. It supports PCIe 3 interface and supports 2 channels of DDR4 memory with the speed up to 2933 MHz. This information is needed. We will use it later for choosing a compatible motherboard and memory. Based on the obtained information, choosing memory is straightforward. If you want to get the most out of your APU performance, simply select the memory that has the speed close to the maximum memory speed that the APU can support. So, the memory we choose use are 2 identical DDR4 memory with a speed of 2933 MHz. The recommended memory capacity is 16 GB. In fact, higher speed memory such as 3200 or 3000 MHz can also be used, especially if your select memory is not available. Don't worry, the memory speed can be adjusted later in the BIOS setting. This picture is the memory that I used. It's a Corsair RPX with a speed of 3200 MHz. I chose this memory because at that time I couldn't find 2933 MHz. As I said, the memory speed can be adjusted later. Next, select a storage device. Currently there are 3 types as follows. First, hard disk drive. Second, SATA SSD or SATA M.2 SSD. And finally, M.2 NVMe SSD. Each storage device has different read and write speed, while NVMe SSD is the fastest. Since the current price of SSD is affordable, so I recommend NVMe SSD. Fast SSD not only helps the PC boot faster, but also helps reduce the loading time of programs or games. The storage device that I use is a Samsung 970 EVO Plus M.2 NVMe SSD with a capacity of 250 GB. Next, choose the mainboard. The mainboard we use must be compatible and support all the hardware we chose previously, including APU, memory, and storage device. If you have extra requirements such as an overclocking function, you have to take this into account when choosing a mainboard as well. As a rule of thumb, choose the mainboard from the mainboard chipset. CPU compatibility for each mainboard chipset can be checked from the manufacturer website. In the case of Ryzen 3400G, which is AMD Ryzen 3000 series, if you take a look at the AM4 support chipset table, you will see that the chipsets that are compatible with the Ryzen 3400G are X570, X470, B450, X370, BT50, and AT20. The B450 mainboard was chosen for my build. This chipset is enough to meet the basic requirement of Ryzen 3400G, including support AM4 socket type, support PCIe 3 interface, support USB 3 Generation 2, support NVMe SSD, and most importantly, it provides an overclocking function. B450 mainboards are available in many models and brands. Each model has different features and form factors. Take your time to find the mainboard that meets your requirement. For my PC, I chose the B450 Tomahawk Max 2 from MSI. From its specification, you will see that it supports all the hardware that I have chosen previously, as shown in the red box. Talking about the cooling system, there are two types of cooling system used in PC: air cooling system and liquid cooling system. Choose the combination that matches your preference, but for ease of installation, many PC usually use air cooling system or cooling fans. For my PC, 4 cooling fans are used. One fan for the CPU cooling, which is attached to the CPU heatsink, and 3 fans for the case. In order to choose a power supply, you have to know the power consumption of your PC. So we have to estimate the power draw from each hardware we put in our PC. The estimation is very easy. We will use something called an online power supply calculator. One tool that I use is the power supply calculator from AutoVision website. Go to their website, and all you have to do is just fill in all the PC hardware information, then press calculate. Not only giving you the power consumption result, it also suggests the UPS spec that is useful for UPS selection. The calculation result for mine is 396 watt, so the select power supply must deliver the power more than that. I chose the Corsair CV550 power supply, which is sufficient enough for powering my PC. Now our PC is taking shape. The only thing left is the PC case. Besides from the look, make sure it provides enough room for your mainboard, cooling system, or even video card. Check your mainboard dimension, whether it is mini ITX, micro ATX, or ATX. Some of you may be using a liquid cooling system, so you will need to make sure the case supports it. Check the front panel I/O of the case, whether it suits your requirement or not. For example, some of you may benefit from an SD card slot. The PC case that I use for mine is an RGB lift from Aerocool. Not only its minimal look, Aerocool lift is also a budget PC case that came with transparent side cover and RGB strip light. Well, this is how I chose the hardware for my build. The most important thing is to check the device compatibility, as I mentioned earlier. Assembling the PC is straightforward. You can follow the instruction manual that came with the hardware. I hope this video is helpful for anyone who is interested in PC building. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you guys next time.